welcome to an Americans for Limited Government live stream. Joining me is Richard Manning, the president of Americans for Limited Government, and I'm Catherine Mortensen. So hang on just a second, Rick. It looks like there may be a technical issue with Rumble. Okay, I'm not going to worry too much about Rumble right now, but we're definitely up on Facebook and YouTube. So we'll just keep going, folks. Rick, what we want to talk about today is really, I think, for me, what this Virginia election has exposed is the deep divide in the Democrat Party. I'm calling it a house divided. It's a little bit of a cliche, but I believe it's appropriate given what we're seeing right now. Do you have anything you want to stay off the top, or do you want to just go right into some of the videos that are out there today? We have an
let me just preview what's you're going to see. You're going to see a Democratic Party that is that in some cases is doubling down on their radical agenda. In other cases, they're saying we've got to take a step back. The voters are a problem for us, and quite honestly, it's really hard to reconcile the two parts. And I want everybody to see the videos because then it puts context into what we're going to be talking about and the challenges that Nancy Pelosi has in putting together a coalition to pass any reconciliation bill, and why I'm coming to the conclusion that the Democratic Party is self-imploding, and this is going to be a make or break year for whether or not the Democratic Party survives as we know it.
I think you're spot on, Rick, and let's check out what AOC is saying today.
On the election front, I actually think we have good news as well. I know that Virginia was a huge bummer, and honestly, if anything, I think that the results show the limits of trying to run a fully 100% super moderated campaign that does not excite, speak to, or energize a progressive base. And frankly, we weren't even really invited to contribute on that race. Plus, on the election front.
All right, Rick, what are your thoughts on AOC's analysis of the Virginia election?
Terry McAuliffe, who lost because Biden's radical agenda, and from everything from critical race theory to the attorney general deciding he was going to criminalize being a parent attending a school board meeting, to the inflation policies and the entire economic policies of Biden, causing real problems for the average person with rising prices that we see every day when we drive by gas stations. And AOC says, oh, none of that mattered. What mattered was we weren't crazy enough. And so that's the perspective of the Progressive Caucus in the House. By the way, the Progressive Caucus makes up 95 members of the Democrat majority. And so it's about 40% of the House Democratic Caucus.
Yeah, so she really is speaking for, as you said, about half of the members in the House right now who think that the Virginia election, the message was, we didn't go crazy enough. That's the AOC perspective. And I want to share a clip with you. This is two clips together. One is Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia. He's asked by a reporter, and it's a little hard to hear the reporter, but the reporter is basically saying, did you go too far with your Transform America bills? Was that the mistake that you all made and that caused Terry McAuliffe to lose in Virginia? And then right after that, you'll hear from Joe Manchin, who has a very different perspective from Tim Kaine.
Rejected these policy changes you're trying to push through?
No, they would absolutely love, like pre-K and child care. Are you kidding me? That's exactly what suburban parents are hungry for, especially after a tough pandemic.
So you don't think you have any second?
No, we should.
Let's start looking and working together, listening to our people back home. I've been listening to the people in West Virginia. They're concerned about inflation. They really have been for a long time. And they talk to me. They says, I go to the grocery store and I can't, it takes me $30 more to buy what I did 6 months ago. And I go to the filling station and drive to go to work, and I'm spending $20 more to fill up the tank or more. These are concerning, and they know that the higher utility bills are coming at them this winter. And we need to be cognizant of that. We just can't just say, well, we can do this, this, and this, and we'll take care of it. We've got to be very careful with this.
Okay, so I'm sorry if the audio was a little low. Rick, were you able to hear those well enough?
I heard I was able to hear both of them.
Okay.
Manchin was obviously a little bit low, but essentially what he was saying was that he talks to people in West Virginia, and they're telling him that the problems are that food prices are going up, and they're seeing the price of the pumps going up, and everything, many of these, they don't get to raise their income based upon how much stuff costs, and as a result, this is causing real hardship to the people he's talking to, and he's equating that directly to the deficit that the America has been rolling up over the past really couple of decades, and that deficit that the Democrats and their reconciliation bill in particular would make even broader and greater and more difficult to overcome. So that's what Joe Manchin's saying, and quite honestly, he has become kind of the life raft for the Democrats in the House and the Senate, who are now looking desperately for a place to land that doesn't put them, doesn't cause them to lose their election in 2022. And it's really kind of an interesting life raft because he's supporting a $1.75 trillion reconciliation bill, which is still a massive piece of legislation that only partially fundamentally transforms America. But it's seen as being the safe alternative for a lot of the Democrats. And the truth is, in the House of Representatives, right now, there are 90 Democrats who are being targeted. Sorry, it was 80 Democrats. 80 Democrats are being targeted by the National Republican Congressional Committee right now because they're in districts that Joe Biden only won by 15%. And so the NRCC is now saying, if you were in a district that Biden won by 15% or less, you're vulnerable to losing in the 2022 election. And every Democrat up here is looking at that and saying, I thought I had a safe seat, and I don't have a safe seat anymore because the electorate is collapsing on me because of the economy and because parents believe they ought to raise their own darn kids. Okay, and that's a very simple thing. It's both a cultural and an economic really storm that the Democrats face. And and while we're a year away, a lot of Democrats right now are looking to the exits to be able to drop out, to essentially not run for re-election. And Kevin McCarthy, Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, is speculating that the Democrats could lose dozens of incumbents who decide, I don't want to go through this. I don't want to have to fight for my seat. I don't want to have to defend crazy. And so a lot of things are happening right now. And and we're really seeing the result of a battle between the traditional LBJ, FDR Democrats who are liberal, and the Democrat Socialist Party, who are socialists and communists. That's what the battle is between right now, the Democratic Party. And the truth is, in primaries, we've seen time and again, the people who are just very liberal are losing in low turnout primaries to the Democrat Socialist crazies who are organized and they've got a lot of money.
Rick, well, I was on the Hill for several years, 2008 to 2013. And during that time, the Democrats purged out the blue dog Democrats from their party. I don't even know if that is even a term, if there even exists any blue dogs. But back then, there were a few still remaining. Those were the moderate Democrats, mostly from southern states. And by the time I left the Hill in 2013, I don't know if there were any at that point, but they were purging them every 2 years. I feel like we may be entering a similar election cycle where the Democrats now are going to purge not even blue dogs, but just sort of the mainstream Democrats, as you described them, sort of the old school, traditional liberal Democrats are being pushed out every election cycle by this new AOC communist wing.
Well, and AOC herself beat Joe Crowley in New York.
Right.
And Crowley was the most liberal Democrat in the House. So the fact is, you cannot be liberal enough to stop the young Mensheviks, the young Bolsheviks, who are pressing forward in the primary, largely fueled by Soros money and what they call dark money. I just call it, there's a lot of association spending that goes in to promote these candidates. So you really can't see them coming, because fact of the matter is they're not spending a whole lot of money in their campaign. It's all being spent by outside sources.
Right. So really the question is what's going on with the Democrat Party right now? You have members that are more sort of the moderate, middle of the road ones, and they're worried right now. They think, okay, if I vote for these two big spending bills, I could lose my seat because I'll be pushed out. Republicans will be so upset. The conservatives, the independents will reject me a year from now. But you also have them facing the possibility that if they don't vote for these big spending bills, the socialist communist wing of the party will primary them in this midterm election. So they're really in a crunch. I mean, two forces coming at them. And I don't know, right? I mean, how are they supposed to vote? My hope is that they back away from these bills. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, first of all, there is no such thing as a moderate in the Democratic Congressional Party right now. That's a fiction. Everybody who is still a Democrat in Congress, after Colin Peterson was defeated in Minnesota this past year, every single person who's a Democrat in Congress is a traditional liberal, or they are a card-carrying socialist at the best. That's where they are. They got rid of anybody who might be considered to be a crossover vote in the House for Republicans to work with. And the proof of that is that Nancy Pelosi has held her conference, her caucus, absolutely firm for the last 2-3 years since she became Speaker, with radical left-wing proposals, and she is not losing any votes to people who are opposing them, for people on the right. Her problem right now is she's trying to hold people on the left to vote for things that people on the far left to vote for things that people who are only on the left want to achieve. Her problem is the people on the far left want to achieve stuff now. And I'll give you a simple example. AOC believes that the world's going to die in 10 years if we don't shut down the US economy. That's what she believes. And it's an article of faith. And it's an article of faith that's held by many of her colleagues in Congress. The people who actually represent people who work in coal mines and people who build things and people who work, have calluses on their hands, they sit there and say, well, we need to have a glide path. We can't just destroy every industry and every good paying job in America. And so they might agree with the idea that we have to destroy free enterprise. They just want to do it more slowly. And that's the fight that exists. The urgency of AOC is built upon an idea that the world is going to flood in 10 years, and and there's no way that we can stop it if we don't shut down modern first world economies. And the U.S. economy is ground zero for being shut down. That's their article of faith, and their opponents believe that. They just don't want to. They believe shutting down the free enterprise system is not a bad thing. They just want to do it slower. That's the fight of the Democratic Party. And the key here is, will the Republicans actually figure this out and start calling who they are and start defending the engine of freedom, the engine of wealth in this world, which is the American economic system, and start defending it, not in terms of defending big business, but defending the actual real capitalism that occurs every single day on Main Street in America, and jump to the defense and stand firm and beat these left-wing socialists at their game, because the fact is they are economically wrong. They're attempting to destroy the country. They're attacking both the cultural fiber of the country and the historical fiber of the country and the economic fiber of the country. And Americans have had enough. So the question really is, will Republicans get a backbone to stand up and fight them, but not bail out the Democrats and let them engage in a fratricide that destroys their party and puts them in a permanent minority for at least half a decade or half a century?
That would be
That's what the Republicans have to do, is let them fight and don't give them any quarter, because they wouldn't give us any.
It's true. Why don't we react to a video? Let's watch a video. You can react to it. This is Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee describing what she is seeing right now on Capitol Hill.
The Democrats in the House are in disarray, and you've got the socialist Democrats who are trying to push all of these socialist wish list items into this bill. You've got the moderates who are saying we're not going to vote on this bill until we get a CBO score. And you have the Senate, where the legislation has to come. And of course, you have Manchin, Sinema, and some of the moderates there, some of the people who are actually up for re-election in the Senate who are saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't do this. I think the Democrats are further apart now than they were a month ago when it comes to getting a decision and an agreement on this reconciliation bill.
All right.
She's right. Catherine, Senator Blackburn is right. The Democrats are further away now. They're further away not necessarily because of philosophical differences about the bill. They're further away because the politics has changed. Because of Virginia, but I will say mostly because of New Jersey, even more so, where a Senate president, who was the second most powerful person in the state, lost his election to a truck driver who spent $157, I think, in his campaign. He ran for office. He never been involved in politics. He ran for office because the local authorities told him he couldn't get a concealed carry permit, and made him mad. So he said, I'm running for office. And so he puts $157 in, and he beats the entire South Jersey Democratic machine. That scares every Democrat, because it tells them they have run out of time and trust. And people who would pull the lever for Democrats there would be no circumstances that they wouldn't. Today, aren't pulling the lever for Democrats. They're looking for change. And those Democrats who are liberals, hardcore liberals, not moderates, as Senator Blackburn said, and we've got to get the people start actually changing their language. There's nothing moderate about these Democrats. They are liberals by every measure. They just aren't crazy left like the AOCs. That's the difference. And when we give them the break of defining them as moderates, we make the mistake of giving them a soft language that they fall back on to fool constituents. They don't vote for anything that is moderate at all. They vote for higher taxes, more regulation, and the destruction of the free enterprise system, and the destruction of your and my personal liberties. Those are not moderates. Those are far left liberals who just have to be facing people who are even further to the left. And for me, a pox on both the Democratic houses. They both are rotten. They both deserve to fail. And if the Democratic Party wants to reconstitute itself as a party of the globalists and the multinationals and Wall Street, that's fine with me. That's who they are in reality. But the fact is, no, they don't get to be called moderates. They aren't moderate. And we cannot allow ourselves to give them a term that provides them with a safe harbor politically, because most Americans think of themselves as being pretty moderate. These people aren't moderate. They want to take away your individual freedoms. Understand that, own that, and make them own it. And if they do, 2021 election in Virginia, New Jersey, and elsewhere will look like the good old days to the Democrats after 2022 and 2024.
So, Rick, to wrap it up, what do you think the Virginia election means for Biden's massive domestic spending bills, the two of them that are stuck at various places in the House and the Senate?
I think eventually the infrastructure bill will pass. The standalone infrastructure bill will pass. It's about $1 trillion. It adds about half a trillion to the deficit that's unfunded. I have a hard time seeing a pathway if the Republicans don't provide one for the Democrats. I have a hard time seeing a pathway for them to pass the reconciliation bill that the Democrats are trying to call the Biden Build Back agenda. Beyond the infighting amongst the players in the Senate and the House and the Democratic side, Joe Biden is extremely weakened politically. He got no bump off of his trip overseas. He got, the election was a referendum on him, and he was roundly rejected. And so Biden is not somebody who politically can help the Democrats through this mess. And as a result, they are sitting there with an infighting game for the future of that party. And it's no rules, no holds barred, no rules. They're running against one another. Primaries will be running against one another. They hate each other. And as a result, they're really not going to come together to give each other a hand for their election because they really want to get rid of each other. So it's going to be a bloodbath over on Capitol Hill with the Democrats fighting amongst one another. And quite honestly, that is a great way for their majority to end in a fallen heap, because what they were proposing and what they've done so far legislatively is disastrous, and it couldn't. And America is better if these Democrats can't figure it out and are not able to pass sweeping legislation that fundamentally transforms America.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate your analysis. And thank you all for joining us today. And check us out tomorrow. We'll be back with another live stream. And Rick and I usually sort of come up with ideas as the day progresses. We see something in the news and we're like, that's the thing that's outrageous. And, there's so much to choose from. So I'm not sure what we'll be talking about tomorrow, but thank you for joining us. It looks like we have one more comment from Diane. Thanks again, Marjorie. Thank you all for joining us. We are very grateful for your support.
And seeing Diana's hands on there, pray for America. Pray for America. If everybody wants to know something they can do, we send out all the time things you can do. But the big picture is we need to cover America in prayer because we're in perilous times. And the fact that Democrats are in disarray also sends messages to people across the world that we may be too weak to respond. So pray for America that the weakness of the left does not embolden those around the world who don't like us very much to try to take actions that really put the world in peril and put peace in peril around the world. So pray, pray, pray.
Thank you, Rick.